Hello and welcome to Interaction Design Module 3 Tutorial 2. So here we are, we're at the end of the module and we're at the end of the term. We have finished our P5 keystroke interaction in our first tutorial. The last one we worked on the makey-makey interaction, and today what we're going to look at is integrating these things and how by integration each of them is improved on. So this is week 12. Oh, and that should say tutorial 3. We're working on the P5 makey-makey integration. We're going to be looking at applying material and interaction experience. We're going to be refining the code from activity 1 to fully integrate with the makey-makey interaction. And a big part is, of course, when you're prototyping, it means you're testing, refining, and repeating. So as we're looking at this, we're going to look at this idea of prototype 2.0. We've played with prototypes over the last 2 terms. Specifically, we looked at prototyping quite a bit with our circuit. But in fact, every single one of the things we've been doing, all of the form storming, all of it has been leading up to this idea of prototyping. We've covered it several times. Prototyping is not just a physical computing thing. We prototype in interaction design constantly. So when we're looking at refining the P5, what does that mean? So let's look at this as an overview of development. The original concept used sound and visual response as the effect of the keystroke interaction. So what I'm covering here is I'm going to be approaching this from the standpoint that I am further developing that sort of sketch 6, that last one that had the interaction between the glove and the octaves. So I have 2 things. I have a sound and I have a visual response, both happening in P5. So these are the kinds of questions that I'm asking myself as I'm looking at refining it. With the sound, is the sound pleasing? Are there other octave choices I could make? Am I making a clear choice or just using what is available? And there's no doubt that one of the variables within all this is a time restraint. So there are some limitations to that. So I guess what I would speak to that on is originally when I had found this 5-octave set of notes, I was kind of blown away at like the nuance within the reverb and the delay, and it was just really beautiful. So I kind of want to really honor that. So I find it very pleasing. I'm sure that my family's been listening to it quite a lot, and maybe they don't find it as pleasing as I do by this point, but I want to follow this through. So are there other octave choices? Yes, there are other octave choices, and it would be interesting to go in and develop them further. I really want to honor this and stick with what I have here and take it further. And so that does lead to it. I'm making a very subjective choice with that. The visuals. Are the visuals aesthetically appealing? Are there other ways? And that is not there. Whoops. Are there other ways to compose these? Are there nuances that could add to the experience? Is it possible to overdo it and ruin it? Because I'm going to find in design more is not better. So are the visuals aesthetically appealing? Somewhat. There are some things that are happening in there that I quite enjoy. When you look at it just from the basic elements and principles of design, using the ellipses and having them sort of like build and collapse on top of each other, it's interesting. I tried playing with color with it, using some sort of tricks that I've done in the past with using like colors switching in and out. Those are fine, but they don't really add to the, maybe they add a bit to the nuance of the experience, but they certainly don't add to the interaction. Are there other ways to compose it? That is something very directly that I've addressed with the changes that you're going to see in the code that I've made. And are there nuances that could add to the experience? I think so. And I think that I've come up with a series of choices that are going to show you guys what it means to further refine a integrated, interactive device and sketch this way. Is it possible to overdo it? It is. And I would say that I've gone the other way. I'm kind of making it a little more simple and bare bones, very intentionally. So what are the next steps with refining the P5? What does this mean, right? So this means refining the sound and the visuals with the interaction, the integration, and the look and feel. And those are specific ways of dealing with prototypes. These all lead to refining the user experience. And that's really what we're coming around to with this idea of integration, is that there is a build up in the user experience through addressing all of these things as integrated and not just as separated. So with the interaction, what does that mean? It means the nuances of how the touch system feels needs to consider, is it not sensitive enough, or is it too sensitive? When you're using that glove and you're touching it, are you seeing the response in a too sensitive way? Is it for instance, creating false positives that disconnect the experience? So what is a false positive? It means that it'll start triggering because it's so sensitive without the actual finger touching the copper tape at the other side. Basically with almost like the button triggering without you pressing the button. Is it that sensitive? Because that will certainly disconnect the experience. Are there interaction misses disconnecting the user from that finger action? So for instance, are there times where you're pressing it but you're not seeing the response, right? Like, is there a timing issue and therefore it's maybe slower than you would expect? Does the delay in the reverb cause some of that so that it's difficult to be able to connect to those things within the interaction itself? Because in this kind of development, timing is everything, and it all needs to line up perfectly to feel integrated. So what does integration mean? So the P5 is going to need to be tested against the physical interaction, looking for disconnects. Going to have to document areas that the physical interaction will need improvement as I'm working on the code. And in fact, specifically, when you see the changes I've made in the code, it'll allow me to then address a very specific change that I'm going to make an attempt for with the sort of finger glove itself, with the makey component. So at this stage, as you guys are experiencing this, I have not made the changes yet to the makey. So I'm going to go in and actually explore them, but I have made the changes to the code so that we could just kind of go through them. I'm going to need to consider how it feels to use it, right? So even though I've made changes to the code, I haven't experienced putting the glove on and testing it with the changes in the code. That will change the way that I feel about the experience. So, are the sound and visual effects responsive? Does the gesture feel connected and the sound with the sound and visual feedback? And does the speed of those responses affect the interaction? Those are the key questions that I'm going to be asking myself as soon as I get the code plugged in. And of course, the look and feel. And this is probably the part that is the most difficult for us to address within the time frame. How far can we push that look and feel? When we talk about paper prototypes versus, or like a lo-fi versus a hi-fi. Hi-fi is expensive and time-consuming and resource-intensive. And so really a lot of what we're going to be focusing on here is going to be more of the lo-fi. Are there things I can do to that aesthetically? Orally is a little different. Orally is going to be the sound, right? So the sound is going to have to do with the speaker setup. There's no doubt. It's going to require a certain amount of speaker setup. I have that here well enough at hand that I'm not too concerned about it. However, what I have not done a lot of is asking other people. And I have brought in just my family to take a look at what I've been working on. And but I certainly have not asked them for serious criticism. And that is probably the biggest flaw that I've had in my system here, is that I'm kind of working in this bubble of following my own curiosity. And I do love honoring that, and I want you guys to honor that yourselves. However, there has not been any true user testing outside of myself with this. And that is a flaw, and it would be a flaw if I was taking this to any kind of sort of a commercial place. With all of that said, let's take a look at the code so you can see sort of what the decisions were and why I made them that way. Okay, here's Visual Studio Code, and if I just pull this back, you'll see that in fact I've still got all those other sketches here, and really all I'm doing is, I did actually add this tone one. I'm not using it, but sketch 7. So I'm just here in sketch 7, and if we were to compare sketch 6 and 7, there's not a lot of differences. So one difference is that I have removed the some of the frequency analysis because I wasn't really using it. It was looking at the amplitude, but it wasn't really analyzing the frequency. And so even though there is a button so that there is a gesture, because there'll need to be a user gesture for it to function properly, I have removed the frequency analysis. I've left in the button itself, and the mouse clicked is here, the delay, the reverb, all that stuff is still here. The turn on, which you can see in the draw, it does that. All of this is just the changing the color in the background. That's all still there, but I can easily comment that out if I choose to completely remove it. I have limited it quite a bit. You can actually see in how the color is set to a random only between 230 and 255. So there's very small amount of full color here, but by having all 3 RGB that way, it's mostly going to be just off whites, right? Like these are mostly going to be in the white zone. So I did that because the spheres were having too much competition with the background, and so I wanted it to be a bit more washed out. And you can see that the alpha is very low. It's 10, and what that means is that it's going to have a slow decay, right? It's not like it's a really fast automatically changing things. I want this sort of, I really like that kind of slow decay in the visual work I do. If we had time to go further, the next step with this would be to be looking at adding shaders, which would be adding extreme visual response and effects to it. But it is its own complexity, and we're not going to be doing that this year. This is probably one of the bigger changes. So if we hop back and just look at 6, you'll notice that in the draw that this is the one sphere, right? So if we were to execute this, you would see that it all kind of happens with this one ellipse, and it just keeps jumping in different sizes based on the different keystrokes, right? One of the other big differences you're going to notice is that this goes from an if to an else if to an else if. Now what that means is it's looking at the keys as an if or else if. So that's a really big an important thing that, in fact, when I overcame that, even though you'll see that it's a very small change in code, but it's a big change in how it works. Because what else if means is it means that if the up arrow is not being pressed, then do this other thing, right? And when you have a bunch of else ifs, what they do is they replace each other. So when they replace each other in the ellipses, it means that all the ellipses, regardless of what note it is, are all tied together really tightly. And I did not want that. And I didn't even realize I didn't want that until I started to really play with it deeper. So if we look at sketch 7, what you'll see is there's actually a series of ellipses. So there's actually 5 ellipses. Now there's something I really want to bring up about this. This is not good code building, right? So you can see that I have one that's red. You can see that like the nuance of color for the R is a little bit different. Here's the G, here's the B. I've named them red, green, blue. The other one is yellow, the other one is pink. So I've created colors for each of the ellipses. And what you'll also see is I've actually given them different locations. So they're really specific. And this is why I went through this process at first of looking at whether I'd build a class or and then a constructor, or whether I'd build a class for the notes themselves and then have the ellipses individually that way. This is the way that allowed me to experiment and test it and adjust them the easiest, just recognizing which one was which. This, normally I would like to create a for loop because this is a waste of space. However, because of those slight changes within each one, and I had to make these changes like size 1, size 2, size 3, size 4, size 5, these had to be made because otherwise they were all responding to each other. So when I would hit one note, all of the notes would actually change in size. So this was the only way that I could actually create it and have it all function really well. This is not sophisticated, it's not nuanced, and it's not optimized. So that's what would be the next step for this. But getting it to work as a prototype is the most important thing, because what you want to make sure is that it's doing what you want it to do, and then worry about refining it and optimizing it. So if we look at the draw, you can see that I have each of those ellipses, and I've had to make all of those very specific repetitions, right? Not good code writing. In the key down function, you can see that I've added a few more things in here. So I've had to create these W1 and W2, W1 and H1 variables. So these are all the sort of width and height. And I've had to do that so that each ellipse really, really responds separately. Now, the other way, and this again is when we're getting into the sort of nuances of this, would be to create an array. So the right way to do this is an array and a class, and through those two things, I could probably have half the amount of code that I have here. And if I take this further, and I give you guys maybe a side 20-minute tutorial on all this just to show where it's done, I might do that. But you know what? This works great. So I'm not really too worried about it right now, but it isn't good practice. This is not the way you should do this, which is, so much repetition, right? The only thing is that this is actually quite different than this. And if these were tied together, you would actually see that they would respond at the same time, and I don't want that. I want the randomness to be really individual. And when you see the randomness of it, you'll see that, in fact, I'm trying to create a kind of a visceral buzzing kind of feel, the way that sound has a background noise. And I've added noise through the use of random, and I don't want them to feel like they're all tied together random. I want the random to feel very specifically that they're individual. All 5 of them are very individual. So because of that, I have all 5 of them, and I've set them all up, and it's actually working really well. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here it is running. I'm gonna just click in it, and I'm gonna press the arrows or the keys. Turn that up a little bit, maybe it's easier. So one of the cool things that can happen is once they start to build up, and even if you're looking at this right now, you'll notice that there's a little bit of buzzing between them. And the way that they all work individually like that, almost like they're little sort of breathing, the way that sound in the background when you have a noise, it's just kind of there as some noise. So each of these you can actually... you can actually see the noise, right? And it's made to give it that little bit of vibration. Now, once I start to build them up, you'll notice that they layer and they'll end up getting very black, which is actually pretty cool. They're saturated, right? And so you can kind of break it, and it's fun. It's also really nice seeing 2 of them at the same time. They play in so as I'm holding that, maybe that's a good way to see. Turn that down a little bit. You can see the way they're vibrating. See how they're moving around? I've created all that randomness, very subtle randomness in the stroke weight, and in that the way the color works, so that it really feels like they're not just sitting there still. And I love the way they overlap and you see the color. and then it just fades away. There. So that's all of the choices that I made to get to that place. This is where I want to sort of leave the code, and then we're going to jump in and look at how these changes have then affected the sort of glove and how they kind of affected each other back and forth. So if we jump here, we're going to look at the next step is going to be looking at refining the makey. Let's look at the sort of overview of developing it in the first place. So the original concept required a real pivot. If you remember that the glove that I was working with turned out to be totally inadequate. I ended up using that sort of fabric tape, and the fabric tape worked really well, and it was possible to design those proto finger kind of things. And then using some found materials, then it was possible to create that bracelet, which I was able to sort of house or contain the connections, which allowed for more dexterity with the fingers because the wires weren't pulling on them anymore. So what do next steps mean for refining the makey? What does refining mean? Well, using the same sort of logic as we did with the P5, we are looking at refining the interaction, refining the integration, and refining the look and feel. And as we then work on those elements and they work in cooperation or in sympathy with the P5 elements, they become more and more integrated as we go step by step. All of this, again, is about the user experience, because the user experience with this is not using a keyboard, it is using the makey. So as all of these things get addressed, the user experience will increase again with the makey side, and then together there should be a much higher integration. So integrating the makey, it needs to be tested against the code, right? I need to be really critical, looking for those disconnects, and then I may have to go back to the code and fix things. Document areas in the code that need refinement so that I can do that. I need to consider how it feels to use it, right? Is the device, is it too tight? Is it too loose? Does it function with the most natural affordance between the gesture and the visual feedback? Is it robust enough for testing? Are there material or fabrication failures? And can I and can you fix your device with available materials? And that's a really important part of this. We're not trying to build things that we're going to need to buy all sorts of stuff and wait for it to come in. We want to use what's available with us with the makey and with the things we can find with recycled products for the most part. Can you continuously ideate for refinement while testing? That's a really important part of prototyping, right? If the prototyping is so flimsy that it's like falling apart while you're using it. And so think about when I was first using that glove and I was testing it and the tape wouldn't even stick and I basically could only get that first step done. That informed my decision to go in a different direction, right? So you need to be prepared to pivot as required. So with the interaction, right, what I'm going to be looking at is the nuances of like how the touch system feels to use it. Is it not sensitive enough? Is it too sensitive? Are there interaction false positives? And we talked about those things from the standpoint of the P5, but now I want to think about them from the idea from the physical computing side, right? Like, are there wiring issues? Are there circuit issues that are causing these false positives? Even the way you might rest your hand. Like, if I have to hold my hand above the thing, because if I rest it, all of the fingers are going to be firing, then that doesn't work. Like, it needs to be something that's going to work from sort of that human experience position. Are there interaction misses, right? Disconnecting from the action, causing the sound effect, and therefore not making sense with the interaction itself. Again, timing is everything, and it all needs to feel very integrated. So the look and feel. Aesthetically, is it pleasing? And that's going to be a real tough one, right? Is it going to be pleasing to hold it? And I'm not sure. And we're going to have to do our best and see what we can do with that. Again, in this case, it would be difficult. My hand is larger than all the other people in my household. This is not made as like a one size fits all. It really is kind of made for my hand. It would be interesting to have someone else test it and see if there's a way to build a solution into that, because that tells you, like, if it mattered that it has to fit many different types of hands, then you'd need a very different way of building it anyway. So that's something to consider. Does it feel good as a wearable device, right? And again, asking other people, take their criticism seriously. Do not coach them, right? Or influence their responses. Listen to what they're saying. And with that, I'm going to jump into the fabrication component of the Makey Makey, and we'll see how we can solve some of these problems in real time. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to be doing here over with the Makey Makey side of things. So you can see that I have the sketch running in the background. So let's just take a look at that. I'm going to use this mechanical keyboard again. So here you can see now this is on a different screen. Make those ellipses a little bigger. But anyway, pretty cool, but nonetheless clunky and not using the technology we are. Certainly not integrated. So here's my camera setup, so you can see the sort of Makey Makey where we are. And let's talk about some of the changes that the code is going to help make some decisions on, that kind of thing. And of course, this is just, it's a massive wiring, and I'm actually looking forward to just tearing the wiring down and cleaning it all up that way. That'll definitely be a part of what we're doing. But there's a couple things. So one of them is I had a bit of a brainstorm about what the Makey Makey could do. And, I mentioned a bit before about Arduino. And one of the things about the Makey Makey is that originally it was actually based on an Arduino chip. And you could, with the older ones, and I kind of mentioned that, you could kind of revert it back to being an Arduino and then do more with it. And that got me thinking, well, with all these other pins here, because you have more than just the WSAD and the arrow keys and that. There's a whole bunch of different pins here. And what these are called rails. And if you look close enough at these sort of rails, you can actually see that you could actually put wires in them. So if you were to take like one of those, wires that you have, like they fit inside those really easily. They're made to do that. If you look at the labeling on some of these wires, what's interesting is if I hold this, let me just turn it around this way a little bit, you can see right there, you can see how it says GND and 5 volt, right? So that got me thinking a little bit about that. And what that means is the Makey Makey has output power, right? So that got me thinking about what would happen if we use that output power, and specifically, like I wanted to use that output power for one of the. Let me just make sure this is all. Oh, let me just click in there for a second. I have an idea. There we go. Yeah, that's all working good still. So here's the idea that I'm toying with. Is what if I were to, let me get this right up here for the camera to see it a little bit. Okay, what if I were to take one of our little flat LEDs and wire something onto the ground and something onto the positive, and what would happen if I plugged that into the Makey Makey? Could I get lights out of the Makey Makey? So let me just make sure I get these in the right side. So I'm running this is where labeling your wires matters, like what color. So I'm using the red wire for 5 volt. So I'm going to put that into that 5 volt rail, and I'm going to take the ground, and I'm going to put that in the ground beside it, and voila, the Makey Makey has power, right? So what that means is that, and it'll probably run, one thing I hadn't tested, like I had already tested this before. I hadn't tested whether that's just going to run straight on the same ground. And I'm very curious about what happens if I do, and I do, it does. So what that means is that this ground that comes off of the finger could potentially do two things. It would be possible to add lights to these. And that's actually where it really kind of informed on this other side, which what these colors are. Now, what does that mean? So I mean that when I hit these, you can see that I have a red, a yellow, a blue, a green, and a pink, right? And this is something I'm not sure, I don't think you guys have the same one as I do, but I had to test a bunch of these different LED stickers. And so one of the LED sticker packs that I have actually has a lot of different colors in it. And so I thought, wait a minute, I have red, yellow, blue, pink, green. I also have orange and white. But in fact, those colors with this pack would allow me to use this pack, and each of the fingers would correlate with one of the LEDs. So I would be able to then have a correlation between the color of the sphere and the finger that it is, and you'd be able to look at your finger and know which color. So you're making a correlation between color and sound as well. So this is one of the things I want to do. I actually want to embed some of these LEDs into the glove. That's a major one. So that's one of the areas that I want to kind of go forward looking at that with. The other one that kind of stands out is specifically, I'm really not happy with the sort of just having the copper running on the tip of the finger here. It misfires a lot. You have to really kind of press down on it. So it's a combination of that and the piece of paper that I was using with this one strip. So this is a very sort of really difficult space to work in. So I'm not happy with either of these. So my solution with it, one is that I wanted to experiment with a little bit of foil. So I actually have grabbed some aluminum foil here, or tin foil, and I'm going to try to actually put the tin foil and wrap it around there, and I'm going to see if I can get the same level of, will it have conductivity? So I'm going to test it, because then what it would mean is I could just use my fingers on the whole surface. I don't need to have this little tiny surface which I'm bending and stuff like that. That's one solution. That's the solution I'm going towards. If that doesn't work, I have some other ideas, but let's start with the first easiest one. The second part is with the fingers. What's missing here is maybe a little more of the kind of mechanisms that we were building with Project One. So I grabbed this again. You probably remember this is that coaster that I had done with the copper tape and the battery. Battery's dead now, so like it won't turn on the lights anymore. But this process of having the sort of like hinged mechanism, I've been thinking a lot about this and adding an element of this into the tip of the glove so that there's a little more action there, right? And so that's my plan. I'm gonna cut up some of the materials for this. I'm gonna prep this. I did think about redoing these finger pieces, but I'm quite happy with the actual this part of them. It works still really well. So I'm going to try to add it on top. That could go wrong. I might have to rebuild them, but I'm going to try to use them and add this other element onto the bottom. And I'm going to test one just to see how it works with that sort of action. The same way that, when I did the testing with the coaster, that there had to be some kind of a spring action there. And there's still a tiny bit left. There's not too much spring left to it. But you do need to test those things, the materials first. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to break each of those jobs down, and I'm going to go in and work on them individually. It may be, well, it is specific that in order to get the this sort of LED system to work, I will have to run this 5-volt as a separate circuit. It isn't going to run off the same one. That would confuse the button effect. So that means I'm going to have to figure out a way to add more this 5-volt electricity to every single finger. And that could get complex with the limitations of what we have here. Like I do have a couple of extra alligator clips, but I don't have that many extra alligator clips. And I don't want to do something that you guys, there's no way you can do it. Like I have tons of wire here and other stuff that I could use. So it's not that I can't make it, I could make it. But then if I work too far outside of what you guys are going to be able to do, what's the point of all this, right? So I want to try to work within the same constraints that you guys are working under. I mean, obviously, I know I'm kind of cheating a little bit with these lights, but, hopefully you guys still have a lot of the other lights and you're not doing something exactly what I'm doing here. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video and we get all my materials ready, and then I'm going to dig in and I'm going to start looking at fabricating this. I thought it would also be good maybe just to show you guys like what am I going to do with all this wiring. It certainly is a problem with the makey. With all physical computing, you'll actually find that it is. So what I'm going to do here is I've actually adjusted the wiring itself. I think that's about correct there. I'm going to what I'm going to end up doing with the wiring is specifically putting it all sort of together and looping it, and I'm going to try to control it a bit that way. I definitely need to be careful with the way that I've got this sort of live wire happening with the 5 volts. I don't know what kind of damage that would do to the LED, so I want to try to keep it fairly clean. I've grabbed this not zip tie, but like a tie back, and I'm going to use this to wrap the wires enough to try to keep them a little cleaner. And if I have to use more than one of these so that the wiring is a little more under control, that's absolutely fine. Twist tie, that's what that's called. So you can see that already helps kind of keep things a little more under control. I've cleaned up the sort of like the finger parts here, and the area that I'm looking at the most right now, and I am, now that I'm doing this, I can already see that the best way, and what I'll probably do is really wrap this one up, is bring the 5 volt electricity to the bracelet and then have each of those go off to the finger. One of the decisions I've had to consider here is that, it might have been nice to have the lights on all the time on the finger so you can look at the finger and go, oh, blue, oh, green, oh, red, but then I would have to run ground as well as power. And so in this case, what it will do is when you press, you'll get the reinforcement of the color in the finger and then also see it on the screen. Might not be perfect, but it'll keep the process within the interaction. I think that's kind of a powerful way of looking at it. So that's where I'm going to go with it at first, and we'll see how that part goes. Okay, I have it all together. I'm going to just drag this out of the way a tiny bit. And drag this. Sorry, I'm doing this with my left hand because my right hand is now embedded. So I'll put that like there. Come back and click here. Okay, let's see how this is going to work. So you can see I've... that's interesting. There it is. I'm just trying to get in a bit of a comfortable position. Sorry, it's kind of awkward to... It's hard to bend. did have a nice little pink LED there. Is it lighting up? There it is. Just a little bit. You gotta really kind of... Ah, there they are. It's like having the infinity gauntlet. So certainly the makey part would require perhaps a little more attachment. Might be a little easier to do that actually. Oh, fingers didn't want to bend. It's like... That's interesting. So one of the experiences with this is that like there's a difference between having your fingers all splayed out and having them bent. Yeah, that's better. You can hear the tinfoil a little bit, but... some funny glitchy stuff going on there. Huh, it's great. Wow, I'm enjoying it. Actually, so those little, you can, let me try to zoom in a little bit so you can see what I have going on here. So if you recall, in fact, what I ended up doing was I actually took a look at one of the pieces that I had, except for the LED stuck to it. This was under the shoe. This was part of the piece that helped create that connection. But in fact, where this really kind of came from is, where is it? I have it like right here somewhere. There it is. So this was the piece that I used for the tap when I built the piece that sort of slid along the tap. And in fact, you can see that it's like basically the same structure. In fact, except this was positive, negative, and these are two positives. But it's the same kind of thing, and it gives like it's almost like using like a ski technology, right? Like it's flexible. The first ones I did were like very much like these like curved ones, and then the last ones I did were a little more sort of finger-like, where I had them just come up like that. I don't know. I kind of did them that way so I could do some user testing and see like which is better. I don't know but it is interesting because you can actually see how they spring. They actually have a fair amount of robustness. I would say that probably the LED connection is probably the least. But overall, worked great. So with that, I'm going to jump back over to the lecture. Let's look at the sort of final thoughts there. If I can click this. So as we kind of wrap things up and we're looking at how we took the P5 sketch and we turned it into an integrated system, how we took the makey, we turned it into an integrated system, we worked them together, decisions were made that reflected the other, added the kind of nuances, and certainly there's a lot of room for improvement still, but as a prototype, it's worked great. So let's look at what the next steps would be. These final steps as we're looking at the user experience of refining this P5 and makey interactive device. The look and feel. Is it aesthetically and orally pleasing, right? Initially and in the duration. And I would actually say that it became more pleasing the more I worked with it. And it was actually more fun as it started to build the nuances. I can tell that the part that is missing is even with the sort of tin foil or aluminum pad, It's a little small, and it'd be better if it was curved a little more so it fit the hand, and I didn't have to like contort my hand to make it work. There was that. Certainly even people who use the piano or playing the guitar, playing the violin, there's a contortionist aspect to using an instrument that way. And it's interesting, there's a back and forth, the sympathy between the musician and the instrument. And in fact, the glove has become a kind of an instrument. It requires, at this point, asking other people, and all I've done is shown some people how it worked. I haven't actually had them test it, and that would definitely be a part of it. Take their criticism seriously, and of course I can't coach them. I need to listen to what they have to say, take notes. Does it feel good as a wearable device? Kind of. Definitely the Makey was just kind of balanced on my forearm, and I would need to consider how I would attach that down. Perhaps some Velcro holding it on. There's some other steps it would take for that to be a little more comfortable, and hopefully yours works more comfortably, and you have thought of different things that I have not, or perhaps this has inspired you to take those things to heart and push yours further. Again, ask other people, take their criticism seriously, and don't coach or influence them. Final thoughts. It's crucial for the look and feel of both the P5 and the Makey device to work together as a composition, right? It's important, and even now, I will keep testing the user experience of my device, and I would say that would be the next step for you if you get to this place and now you're going on with yours. Make sure you keep testing it. Base your decisions on user testing and be prepared to adjust as required. You're going to have assumptions. You need to find ways to be able to become more aware of your own biases, as I have to be aware of mine as I am prototyping as well, so you don't get blindsided by them. Your next steps. Makey P5 integration form storming. Please take all of this as inspiration as you work on this last summative project. This is the final component as we go into project 3. You're going to want to refine your Makey for integration. You're going to want to refine the code that you're building for your integration, compose them together to achieve that kind of full integration, and start form storming.